Welcome to the final session of The Lab, Making Sense of Immersion in 2021. This series of online meetups gathers key professionals from the mixed reality and museum industries for game-changing conversations. For today's last episode, we're going to discuss the next steps of the immersion and museum industry in 2021. I am one of your hosts, Valentin Ducrot from Fabula. Let me introduce the consortium real quick. This program has been initiated by We Are Museums, an online community of practices composed of museum changemakers leading the field towards better futures for people and the planet, and Museum Connections, an international trade fair focusing on the business and sustainable challenges of museums, cultural and touristic venues. Museum Connections highlights trends and innovations to imagine new visitor experiences. The next edition will take place in May in Paris, France. So for the lab series, Museum Connections and We Are Museums connected with key actors from across fields and oceans to join forces. These include the cultural services of the French Embassy. As part of the program French Immersion, the French Embassy has launched a study on how to fund and distribute immersive experiences. The study is conducted by the US crowdfunding platform Kaleidoscope Fund that has built a global network of more than 20,000 top VR creators and industry leaders. Next up is the Pixie Festival, a French festival that features an exhibition of the most innovative stories in digital installations. And last but not least is Fabula. Fabula is a cultural practice and observatory dedicated to the idea of worlding with digital media, be that virtual reality, open worlds, or online streams. Now, as far as the program is concerned, this program has the ambition to create a safe space for dialogue for the key actors of the VR and immersion industry, working directly or indirectly with cultural institutions to impact and unlock the remaining challenges that exist in our industries. Now, let me introduce Marisa Betts. So Marisa is an international development and brand strategist in the arts and cultural sector. After working in the digital communications team of a lot of Parisian museums, she is now using her skills to organize Museum Connections, the annual meetup of the international culture industry in Paris. Hi, Marisa, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Valentin. So, hi, everybody, also from the part of Museum Connections. For those who haven't been participating in our 3 working sessions, I'll give you a quick summary of what we've been doing and especially why. Last year, with the other members of the lab, we started to face insecurity in the industry. Questions were raised about the future of immersive projects, how to best collaborate, and start having open discussions on the topic. Together, we had the ambition to push our industries forward. We created a safe and friendly space for dialogue between key actors working with virtual reality and immersion in culture spaces. By using the full potential of our collective intelligence, we could then openly discuss and unlock the main challenges of this industry. And as we know that network is key, we managed to gather the best institutions, producers, and platforms internationally. To name only some of them, we had people from the Louvre, the Met, and the Smithsonian for the biggest museums, as well as Centrophie, Arctic House, Super Blue for the most innovatives. Divergent Cinema, Marshmallow Laser Feast, and Iconospace joined us for the VR Trailblazers, and the Natural History Museum of Paris and MIT Center for Art for exploring new practices. Well, I actually could continue for long with that list. Together with them, we discussed 3 big topics. First of all, we talked about ways to foster collaborations between immersive creatives and culture spaces. We started with the basics and asked ourselves what makes an immersive experience successful. Then the discussion went into what needs and expectations VR producers and museums have when starting an immersive project. We understood that collaboration should start early. By doing so, content will fit the space, the narrative, and the audience. Also, the clearer both parties are about their expectations, the more sustainable the collaboration will be. We advise you to really define in advance your income model, your marketing strategy, as well as the main goal of your VR project. It's also really important to train the museum team to involve the entire institution on a broader scale outside of the digital project team only. Well, our second session was then all about the distribution of immersive artworks in a museum. We mapped and understood the different existing business and funding models, as well as their advantages and disadvantages. With actually 6 teams working on the question of viable business models, it came out that a blended business model with a range of options would be the most effective. All the possibilities that we listed show us that the distribution model for VR can be as diverse as the culture institution and the projects themselves. So you could use, for example, a licensing model with minimum fees or a direct ticket sale revenue. You could also go for a subscription model or bring touring or permanent VR experiences to a space. Participants also highlighted that a mix of financing partners would help to ensure the best suitable fundings. So beneath regular financing partners like public media funds and grants, we also listed thematic grants or funding possibilities that are directly proposed by museums. However, we can generally note a lack of formal structures for financing XR and digital art forms. Distribution is a big challenge too, and that's why we strongly advise you to start collaborating in the earliest possible way and to co-create between venues and producers. And then finally, we pushed the door of the technologies of the future for our third session. Wonders and also new worlds have been described using immersive sound, volumetric videos and holograms, multisensory AR, and personalized experience using artificial intelligence. We also unpacked how better understanding of technologies and the latest news can be provided to museums. The key is really in communication and experience. I mean, how do you want to understand something if you've never tried it? We also advise you to organize sessions to try and share about the technologies with the museum team. This could definitely be very helpful to see the industry move faster. Well, this was a very quick summary, and you'll find all the detailed results with concrete examples and advice in a handbook that we edited and which we will send you very soon. And so for the final round today, we actually felt it would be interesting to challenge our conclusions and confront them with the point of view of different professionals. And so here we go, and Fabien will introduce them to you.
So let me introduce Fabien Sufi, our moderator, real quick. Fabien is the founder of Fabula, and with his team, he curates groundbreaking exhibitions, such as the upcoming festival Palais Augmenté at Le Grand Palais in Paris, which is a group show entirely dedicated to augmented reality artworks. Next up is Les Ailleurs at La Gaîté Lyrique, still in Paris, which is a 3-month festival between April and July 2021, dedicated to immersive arts and virtual reality pieces. He also created the 2018 and 2019 editions of VRL Festival, among many others. Fabien is our moderator for today's panel discussion, which is about the next steps of the immersion and museum industry in 2021. Bonjour, Fabien.
Bonjour, Valentin. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here, and welcome to everyone listening to the stream. I'm particularly pleased to be opening this closing session of the program. Fabula has been associated with the first one. It's been very insightful. And I would like to start by introducing our panel members today. And so we have the pleasure of welcoming Mehdi Mejri. Hello, Mehdi. From France. Mehdi, you're the director of digital immersive exhibitions at Atlas V or Atlas 5, and a production studio who won a lot of awards for their AR and VR immersive experiences. Before joining Atlas, Mehdi Mejri held several positions at MK2, MK2, the cinema group in France, as the director of VR and innovations director. He opened the first virtual reality LBE in Europe and installed other LBEs around the world. He also produced numerous VR experiences, as well as the exhibition Oceans, the digital immersive odyssey, which is an exhibition in Nice and that was held in 2020, amongst others. We also have the honor to welcome. Hi, Mehdi. We also have the honor to welcome Sarah Snyder, who's the Chief of External Affairs and Digital Strategies at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Renwick Gallery in New York. She's been working on web and digital user experiences at the Smithsonian since 2007 and has worked on 5 different museum VR projects since 2016, including overseeing the creation of 2 different room-scale VR applications based on the physical museum architecture and the art collections. The first, called Smithsonian American Art Museum Beyond the Walls, is available for download on the Steam gaming platform, while our most recent projects, No Spectators, The Art of Burning Man, uses Sensor, a social VR platform to experiment with new levels of interactivity and engagement between audiences and curators or docents. Hi, Sarah. We're delighted to welcome Nina Diamond. Nina is an executive producer and editorial manager at the digital department of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Her experience as a writer, director, and producer of award-winning media projects spans TV, feature films, audio, video, animation, and interactive projects. Recent works particularly leverages emerging tech, including 360 video, binaural audio, VR, and AR. Our last guest is the famous VR artist Mélodie Mousset, who's behind the VR artwork Anna Anna, a multi-user online virtual world that's been constantly updating and iterating since its first appearance in 2017. The work of Mélodie oscillates between virtual and physical realms to focus on the physicality of the human body and the potential virtuality of the minds. For investigation around the body, Mousset works with immersive media, including installation, performance, sculpture, photography, video, and virtual reality, and augmented reality as well. Mélodie currently works on The Jellyfish, a sound-activated artwork in VR, and Patch XR, a creative tool to create spatial audio experiences in VR. Welcome, Mélodie. I'd like to get us started with the topic of collaboration. This is something that's been coming up quite often in our conversations about the necessity to collaborate early on between cultural institutions and people from the more immersive focused sector, producers and artists. And that necessity, to me, led me to ask this question about how to remove the challenges in collaborating early, be them cultural, organizational, or methodological. So perhaps more precisely, I would like to ask some of the represented from the cultural institutions here, namely the Met and Smithsonian, about what do you see as the challenges you're facing in collaborating early for immersive projects? Sarah or Nina?
I can address one of those. I would love to hear Nina's thoughts too. For an art museum like the Smithsonian American Art Museum, we're planning our exhibitions often 3 to 5 years in advance, securing loans of artworks, making plans for our spaces that are really more long-term. But we've seen with interactive and immersives, often opportunities and technology change rapidly, and we may find ourselves with an opportunity that we just don't have the space for based on the way that we currently plan. So I think one thing that museums need to embrace more broadly across the way we plan, not just in digital projects, but in all projects, is a more agile methodology to the way we organize our work and the way we envision how we meet our mission in our buildings.
So do you mean agility in the sense of going faster in implementing a project?
Or more like the agile methodology of software development, right? Where we're working in chunks and sprints and we have flexibility rather than speed, right? So it's not about going faster, it's about being modular in the approach so that we can make changes if we need to.
Yeah, I think that's a very important notion. Idea of working with modularity and chunks of things that can be rearranged in certain ways but not lost, especially with a 3 years time frame, which seems like an eternity for most of immersive producers. Nina, is that the same context over at your institution? Do you feel that there is a requirement for agility?
I'm sure somewhat. It's interesting because Diane mentioned in her intro that every project, there's a great diversity of projects and approaches. And I was smiling to hear Sarah talk about having that lead time for some of the iteration that she described. For example, recently we mounted an exhibition at the Met Breuer, which for those of you who've visited, it was the Met's sort of outpost for displaying contemporary art in conversation with the Met's collection. And we had mounted an enormous retrospective of Gerhard Richter. And the show was only able to be open for 9 days. And obviously, I think everyone can appreciate the enormous challenges that our whole world is facing because of the pandemic. But this project grew out of that as an opportunity to quickly capture that exhibition in VR and to package it as a 360 video that you can find on our website now with music and some quotations from the artist and so on. And it was an example to me of not having any prep time, rushing and doing everything quite quickly, but the resulting project we're very proud of. And it allows a global audience to explore the exhibition in a quite leisurely way, beautiful high-res images, and really meets the Met's mission of connecting people to art and ideas. But as you say, it really depends on the project. Other projects that we've worked on have had a much longer ramp-up time.
So perhaps I think over to you, Mehdi and Melody, you're on the creative and creation side of things here. And I was wondering if for you working on such a long time frame, say you're projecting yourself in 3 years, working on an exhibition at the Met or the Smithsonian, what would be your approach to such a project? What would you start with? What would be essential and now, and then the things that you keep for later in the process? Mehdi, for example?
Yeah, I could start, Melody, if that's okay for you. I would say that it's true that we are working with technologies like that looks like their evolution is very quick, and that you have a new headset or a new technology, a new immersive technology every 6 months, which is true. So these kind of projects, they all start with the writing, obviously, but then, which is interesting and which is really a first, I think, in the way we can produce content, is the fact that it's super agile like never before, because we are working in real time with real-time engines, and that means that the scene that we are crafting, the scene that we are preparing, it doesn't matter if it's going to be used by video projectors or VR headsets or I don't know, tablets or phones, because it will always be the same scene. So the 3 or 5 years doesn't mean that because it's a new technology, we will have to wait for the right technology to appear, because thanks to the real-time revolution, we can now prepare every scene and just have to bring this scene to the media, just like the way audiovisual content was produced before until nowadays.
So I think that's very interesting to pose a little bit about this real time, and if we can call them game engines, because that's the main creation tool I think that are being evoked here. And I know, Melody, that's a lot of what you're working with these days, right? You're working with Unity, and I was wondering if you could explain a little bit your process, like how do you get started, for example, with Zanana or Jellyfish? What is the first thing that you're doing when you create?
Yeah, I mean, to also complete what you were saying, Mehdi, I think there is like the final result or final way of how people will experience the work is something that's very versatile because of the technology and the game engine, as you say. Is like once you've developed your scene, this can be an AR app or a VR app, or you can export video, or can be actually that can be a WebGL thing. So as the technology itself is not really there, like in the like the way you're gonna experience it, that comes much later. But the process of creating the work and the world and all the mechanics and all the assets of the world and a lot of testing and experiencing and rewriting things as you go, because it's not a typical workflow where you write a story, because it's all about how it feels to do that. I mean, on my personal level, I'm very interested in the interactivity and the non-linear experience. So I give a lot of agency to my user, to myself, actually, when I go through my work. So for me, it's like the writing is more about how it feels, how do you trigger sense of curiosity or how do you bring, you know, this kind of conceptual, like idea or experiential things that I want my user to go through when he's experiencing the work. So I feel like the iterative process that we're mentioning a lot is very important in the process of making this work. So there is the writing, what you think is gonna work, and then how it feels when you're actually putting it together, code it, try it with your body, and then you're like, yeah, that's actually completely wrong. I need to rewrite this whole part. So the production time is a lot, takes a lot of time. So like 3 years, I don't know, Anna took me 4 years, maybe even 5. Like my first draft have nothing to do with what is the final result today. But the interesting part though is like from that, I mean, that core concept, which is quite simple, this building blocks of creating hands on top of hands and creating a metaverse that people can join from a lot of different museums and, you know, engage in a creative process together without communications, like just visual cues and sound cues. What's quite interesting is now, for instance, this word can very easily come to an AR application, and that's what we're doing with the Palais Augmenté, I guess, where we're bringing all the assets and all the concept to the Grand Palais and having people, you know, engaging with this metaverse, but through their phone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is quite it's a new development, I think, to consider obvious. That is to say, like a few years ago when we were working on immersive projects, we were thinking 360 video, narrative, perhaps interactive narrative. But I think from both the point of view of Melody and Mehdi, we were talking about creating a world and creating a kind of core experience attached to this world, and that can then be mediated or broadcast in various ways. When that kind of creative process, is that something that is acceptable or understandable from an institutional standpoint? Is that something that people can relate around you, Sarah and Nina?
Well, I'm struck by the full bloom project with the hands that keep emerging. I'm smiling, Melody, because I think in a way it's a metaphor for the iterative process that you described, because I didn't get to experience the full experience only online, but the way the hands were continuing to grow out of one another and even communicating with one another was really fascinating. And I think there's something remarkable about that, actually, the way that connected to your process.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, there is also like one of the latest development on this app was that the hands, so not only people could connect like from different museums and time frame over, so basically it grows during the exhibition as people join in and create stuff. And then in this metaphor of also collaborating online and in this virtual metaverse, what happened is when hands start facing with each other's, wherever it's been created in China or here, but if they end up like facing each other, they would have this kind of electric network that's visualized, and then this like surreal, archaic landscape somehow become very industrial with this like electric network forming over this desert. And then you can actually play this electric network as a musical instrument to control the weather. But it's really like about creating a visual network, like kind of almost materializing what is happening under the hood, like on the technical, on the engine side, let's say.
So again, I think on this creation of, if we're talking about creating worlds and kind of places, virtual places, as experiences that are being represented in museum, just saying this probably a year or two ago would have sounded bonkers. But I guess with what we just had lived in the last 12 to 18 months, suddenly it becomes almost sensible. It's like, yes, we need virtual places. We actually need them because of sanitary reasons, or just generally because it sounds like it's becoming the trend that we embarked onto. So do you think that it's something that is at a point of maturity, that this notion of building virtual worlds and inviting perhaps communities that are invited by, or that follow cultural institutions, inviting them into this type of world, is that something that you feel the institutions feel a responsibility for? Do you think that's something that they increasingly feel like, yes, this is what we should do, this is how we should engage with our audience, not just in our walls, but online? And online is not just social media, but also this type of virtual worlds.
I mean, I think for institutions, we've had old models of looking at some of these developments. I know in an older institution where you think a lot about your collection, right? What is an artwork we acquire and take in as part of our official patrimony that we're going to preserve and make accessible into the future? Bringing in time-based media art of different types, networked art is complex, and museums have had to sort of struggle with how much they can commit to keeping something perpetually in their permanent collection that has an ephemeral nature to it, and sort of what are the models for acquiring digital art. I mean, that's a whole topic. And then there's this other side where we look at interpretation or engagement or participation that isn't about the collection. It's about bringing people in and having an experience where they can learn or have an aesthetic experience. So I found it's much easier to work on the side of interpretation and engagement than in the collection side, simply because you don't have the weight of having to care for a complex digital work in perpetuity. But I think we miss out in some ways if we don't bring more of those works into the collection at a higher rate, because we're not capturing the current moment of contemporary art. So, both things are happening in Smithsonian and in other institutions, but there are complexities we haven't worked out yet. And I'm excited to see what happens as we get into the post-COVID era and are able to open fully all of our museums again, where we land on these questions.
Sarah, I think just on this topic, I find it really interesting what you've done with Censar and The Art of Burning Man. I haven't seen the show, but I conceptually, I'm quite interested in the way you're building the physical events or assets or art into a platform that can be qualified as a virtual social network in 3D and VR. So did you have people connecting into Censar in order to watch the show and solely see the show there? And if yes, what was the outcomes? What was the reaction to that?
Yeah, I can quickly summarize that project, and I have a couple images I can share if that's okay. So we had an exhibition at the Renwick Gallery, No Spectators, The Art of Burning Man, that was focused on sharing the large scale work that's associated with this this desert gathering, right? When we launched the show, we realized many people would never make it to Washington, D.C. to come into the Renwick Gallery. So we worked with some partners with some corporate support from Intel to capture the entire Renwick Gallery architecture in 3D 4-room scale VR. You can see it's in great detail and all of the interactive artworks in the exhibition. So you can actually tour the entire No Spectators Art of Burning Man exhibition still today in VR using the Censar social platform. What's interesting about it to me, not only do we have this wonderful time capsule of an ephemeral installation that's now been gone for several years, but it actually has a social component. So you can see in the center here, my avatar walking through the space. So not only can I attend the exhibition, still after it's gone, I can do so with friends. And we had our curator, Nora Atkinson, giving tours to other groups of avatars in VR. And this was my favorite part about it. And this is where I'm really excited to see more development in the future of social VR, because Nora spent so many hours, happily, here you can see our mess of cords in my office. You know, so many hours walking people through the exhibition in Avatar, just like she would have given gallery talks in the space. And she found it was not really any different for her because the technology became transparent. She forgot about the headset because she was interacting, asking questions, sharing this artwork and the stories that she'd been putting together, the interpretation she'd been putting together. So this to me was a first glimpse of how, when we get to the point that the hardware is ubiquitous and a little more lightweight and transparent, it will become very easy for our curators. We had docents also giving tours, educators giving tours, to reach people who never will set foot into the physical exhibition, but will connect only online in a way that feels very material because it's 3-dimensional and you have a body in the space. So that's a summary of that project, but I would love to hear people's thoughts about the continuation of this social element, which I think is going to be the key. I mean, people are what make all of these things interesting, so.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And it's interesting that on the last image you showed, we don't see the Renwick Gallery anymore. It's
right. We put some outdoor sculpture. Yeah, we moved. There's an outdoor space and an indoor space, so you see the true architecture, but you also see a fantasy desert beyond the back door that we invented for the purpose of conveying the sense of what it's like to be in the deserts of Nevada, where these works would have been initially shown.
That's good. That raises a question of the attachment of institutions to their history and legacy and perhaps their architecture as well. For you, Nina, you work at this prestigious institution with a prestigious location and a very long history. Do you feel that it's possible to have something that is curated by you but not hosted in a place that looks like your institution, Matt?
It's a good question. Just a few days ago, the Met launched a new experiment, a pilot with Verizon, which you can all look up. I'll share a link. It's called the Met Unframed, and it's an interactive virtual art experience that has AR versions of about 50 iconic works of art from the Met collection. You can explore them in 12 virtual galleries, and you can also display them virtually at home. So it's a fictitious environment. It's not 12 galleries. If you love the Met and you can have a floor plan in your mind of moving through the space, you're going to be disoriented here because the galleries are not contiguous in the way that they would be in reality. But there's some game elements to it, and that's one example, I think, of us, the Met, using pilot projects to make experiments with how we might play around with our permanent collection. Sarah makes a great point about the distinction between, I think her team did a beautiful job of taking something that was an external experience and you really would have had to go to the remote desert to see it, and bringing that into a gallery space. And I think the project that I just described is doing the opposite. It's inviting people in. We've also done a project recently, a pilot with Instagram that was playing around with some of their new filters, and I can share a link to that too. But it allows you to take several objects that the Met worked with to scan in extremely high res, and you can place them at home in an AR experience that actually lets you spin them, lets you zoom on them, and there's some interpretive audio components to it as well, which I in particular felt was super important. For me, this notion of the interpretive layer on a sensory experience is one of the key things that I think this whole team must be fascinated with as well. And I would really look forward to hearing more about that from other people. I was looking at a little bit of Mehdi's work, in particular, one of his stories where it was a VR story called Mirror. Am I right?
Yes, indeed.
And I think I think it was maybe the director was talking about it being a love story about grief, and that these layers of story, when you can bring someone in, for me, one of the most interesting questions is, how do you create content that is sophisticated or nuanced enough to merit repeat use? Like, what is it that makes someone want to come back? Certainly we have that in an art museum. People want to come back and see those objects. You have that with music. You have that with favorite films. And I think it's one of the key challenges for this industry and for creators to think about.
Really, you want to comment on this? And I think your point of view and the point of view of Atlas as to what type of experiences you see in, being present in museums and cultural institutions in general. What do you foresee would have attractions and relevance in the future?
Well, we didn't get an ID for every type of museums, but it's true that it's quite easier to see how oceanographic museums will evolve, considering the new feelings of the public and the society about big species. About art museums, it's a little bit harder to get if the digital twins of the museums will be enough to bring an interesting experience and an emotional experience to the public, compared to the fact that before you could just travel and go to the Met and have your experience, even if you were in Europe or in Asia. That would seem just normal, which doesn't look normal at all nowadays. But it's true that in a few months or years, if we are again, and I really hope not able to travel to the museums that we like, even if they are abroad, will the digital twin of the museum will be enough, or will the temporary exhibition will be the real digital twin of the exhibition offer of the main museums. But these virtual creations and the way they'll be written will really be the key, and it's really what we are trying to to think about. I can quickly show you something which is more basic, because as I said, it was really about a kind of museum that very logically will let me try to show it to you. It's an immersive exhibition that played last year. I hope you're able to watch my screen. And it was really an interactive aquarium where you will be able to see big species that you couldn't obviously met in aquariums. Obviously, producing this when I was at MK2, we were really working on how the zoos and the aquariums will maybe get into, to be able to show these species to the publics and to educate on how fragile our planet is. This is quite easy to grasp. So and now we are trying to find how the immersive technologies will help the art museums.
Thank you, Mehdi. I'd like to also to ask Melody about what do you see in the future for museums? What would you like? Your experience, you're an artist, you exhibit in museums and galleries. What do you see as the role of an institution in 5-10 years from now for your kind of work?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's been interesting working with VR at this, at the very beginning where it started to be exhibited in museums, like because nobody actually knew how to show VR in museums. When I did my first show, in Art Basel in 2015, it was just crazy. I remember how, there was like the museum guardian, like the fair guardians were just like, oh, but is it even safe to show this work to the public? Is there like a health issue to follow? And then, it's basically since I started in 2015, like things have changed, but very, very slowly. Like when I showed in where was it? I don't know, in Germany, this big museum, whatever. It was their first, like it was, what's the name of this museum? Do you remember, Fabien?
In Düsseldorf, no? The HKW?
No, it's called the Cube. Whatever. It was like a traditional museum for art, not contemporary art. And they wanted to get into mixed reality, and they made their first show there, and just they had nobody who knew how to install a network, VR headsets, how to even form the museum guardian to host the public and to put the headset on. There was like such a, it was crazy. Like everything went, it worked out, but everything went like the worst it could go, let's say. Like, computers were hidden inside walls, because they wanted to keep this white cube aspect. So computers hidden in wall, overheating after one day, of course, and just like nothing was working. So all the technology had to come out. Things are just you know, I feel like every time I have a show, it's like it's moving a little bit. Like now I actually know how to teach people to actually install the work and introduce the public to the work. But definitely, I mean, I love the fact that people have not been afraid in getting involved in this technology that can feel a little bit like magic sometimes, like even black magic. It's all these black boxes, nobody understands how it works. There's so many cables, like, and it is frightening. So I understand that it's a big step for museum to, and also it never goes right. Like VR, there's always, the computer is crashing, and there's nothing you can really do about this. This is happening, and this is not something in the art world we used to. You know, you install the work and it is there, and the main goal is to not have anybody stepping on it. But this is such a different way of engagement with the work, which I feel like museum needs to grow with this, and like technical team needs to also come in museums. Because on the other side, you know, if you're looking, because I've been also for some reason involved in the gaming as well, and showing in a lot of gaming convention and things like this, where you don't care if cables are kind of everywhere and you don't look at the aesthetic aspect of your installation. It's really about just the work or the game or whatever. But for me, this is not enough. Like when I make an installation, I actually have a spatial vision of how I want the public to enter the work, you know, not just a VR experience. And this, I feel like the museum experience and installing experience and curatorial experience comes in, you know, how you deal with handling this technology as aesthetical material or being part of the work as well. So that's something I think that should come together. And it's coming together, but it is a big step to be done, I guess.
Thanks, Melody. Yeah, I think this troubleshooting we can all very much relate to. It's a very hard. I just want to take 1 second to tell everyone that we're getting into the Q&A time. So if anyone from the attendance wants to ask a question to all the panelists or one of the panelists, you can do so in the chat box. That's open for everyone. We had one question before, but it's been already answered. So you can all have a look at the question raised on the Art of Burning Man. And so in the meanwhile, as the question flow, I think there's this one actually question I wanted to ask you, and I think it relates very much to what you just said, Melody. It's the matter of the culture of cultural institutions, the culture of the culture. This is a personal standpoint, but I very much see the cultural institutions as the experts in what makes culture and what constitutes culture, and what counts as legacy and what doesn't. At least in some ways, not with formal authority, of course, but with the power of influencing that. So I think the role of institutions has never been more important than today, where we are inundated by tons of stimuli in the digital attention economy that surrounds us. And so given that role of not gatekeeping, but at least bringing at the forefront interesting propositions from the digital sector or realms. Is that something that you see as your role? To start first, like this is very much what I see, but you're in the sitting chair, so you, Sarah and Nina, do you feel like you have to really make what's interesting visible and what's not interesting maybe less visible? And if yes, if that's your role, how do you do so? And how do you kind of tell that to people around you within the institutions?
I'm going to extremely graciously let Sarah answer that first.
It's a big topic, and it's a political topic, right? Who has the power to make those decisions? in an institution, and where does it come from? Is it from a place of a, I talked about collections or a curatorial acquisition plan, or is it coming from the interpretation and the education side of the teams? But I think it's a moment. It is the right moment for museums to ask themselves this question very seriously, because they've all been talking a lot about how they've pivoted to digital in the last year. But in truth, when we talk about resources and power within institutions, how are we going to use that moving forward?
Yeah, huge topic, Fabien. Thank you for raising it. I think that every museum probably in the world is engaging with a reckoning that has only been illuminated in the last year, but has pre-existed it forever. So I think what you're describing are super interesting and important questions about the museum's responsibility, not just for sharing out its resources of expertise and collections, but in recognizing with great humility what's outside of its doors as a source of inspiration and information and analysis and the expertise of lived experience. So I could talk about this for hours, but I won't. I'm really interested in what others have to say, but I would only say that at the Met, in our department and in the myriad projects that we have in flight right now, we're really involved in not only what is that content, what are the stories, how diverse are those stories, but what are the means of production for telling them, and who are you working with, and who's at the table and discussing that. So it's crucial.
Thank you both. We're starting to see questions coming up in the chat box. So I'll start with the ones from Andres Cortes. Questions, perhaps it's linked, and it's from a point of view of inclusivity and accessibility. What can we do to progress in those areas? COVID definitely impacted everyone, but perhaps some of you want to comment on what exactly has changed in the last 12 to 18 months of the COVID being between us in your practice? Maybe Melody or Mehdi, what has changed for you?
Considering that the studio, well, for me personally, it's changed a lot because I come from the cinema industry, and my department has to close. My VR innovation department has to close because all our cinemas in France and in Spain were closed, and for so long that we had to close our department, at least part of the company I was managing. So personally, it was a big change. But from what I see into Atlas 5 studios that I joined a few months ago, because they are really focused on bringing their storytellings to digital platforms, it's been actually a very good year for this kind of VR experiences. This brings me to a strategy analysis that the guys at Disney just very quickly adapted to. Like, okay, our parks are closed. Part of our Disney experience is not accessible to people because they can't travel, or our spaces are closed. So we put our efforts into having our digital place where we will bring stories and content to the nearest point where the people are, meaning their homes. So it's really interesting to see how in the next months and years we will be able, to bring these storytellings that people usually feels when they are doing an exhibition, and bring the same kind of feelings to them, maybe not to their homes, but if you look at how the exhibitions work into a museum, you have the temporary, you have this kind of also touring exhibitions. So right now, when you think about people not being able to get out from their country or their town, how maybe the big museums will be able to bring them their exhibition or touring exhibitions or temporary exhibitions in their town. So I think right now we are all hoping that we'll all be able to travel again at the end of the year. But it's true that we have to think that maybe it will maybe take longer. And the big efforts that the museums are bringing into making wonderful exhibitions, well, maybe part of those maybe need to be accessible to people that can't travel, and it will even make it easier for people that have maybe sometimes a very just for even out COVID difficulty to travel
or unwillingness.
Yeah.
Flying to an exhibition is something that is getting increasingly strange in our world. I know the art world is thinking really deeply about the idea of having these biennales everywhere where people jet from one to another. It seems a little bit irresponsible in these times. So sounds like
but I was also thinking about you're making me thinking about the accessibility, the fact that we are all not able to travel. Well, there is also people that don't have the money to travel outside COVID situation, being because they don't have the budget for that, or they are maybe not able to move to the exhibitions. So I hope the fact that we will all be thinking about new ways of making maybe this, or at least part of these exhibitions to the public. Maybe it will make even it will be a very positive evolution for the rest of the people.
I just want to point that it's 5:25, so it's time for wrap up. We cannot take additional questions, but I just want to mention people who ask questions because I want to thank them for that. There was a question from George Vitale from Synthesis Gallery. Synthesis is a VR-based art gallery founded in 2017, operating out of Berlin. And George wanted to know, what do you find the most exciting about VR arts right now? And what do you think is missing for the large mass adoption of VR technology? We had another question from Ankush, who asked, do you think cultural institutions could benefit from external consultancy on general digital innovation, or should it be a direct relationship between the staff and their digital provider of choice once they decide direction? So I actually have a note that we have 5 minutes to answer perhaps one last question. So perhaps let's go back to George's question. What do you find the most exciting right now about VR arts? From perhaps either Melody, because I know you see quite a lot, or Sarah or Nina around you. What do you feel artworks made in VR? What do you find interesting, or what excites you?
I mean, I can say what does not excite me, actually.
No. We know the list is long.
I mean, there's many things that are not exciting in VR, but it's normal. We're all trying to figure out what's exciting in VR and trying to, we're researching as we're doing it. So things are just keep changing. But what for me is really exciting is the interaction with sound, visual and gesture, so the body basically in real time, and how we can create art that is playing on this synesthesia you know, kind of elements. So music, procedural audio, spatial audio, you know, that are unique experiences. So instead of, I mean, I know, for instance, maybe you come more from the storytelling part, and there is also unique, what do you say, unique moments that you can create with this interactive engine and real-time engine within the narrative. But for me, that's really what's, and I think that's also answering the other question that also brings people back, because actually you have this artwork that reacts to you, reacts to how you engage with it, how you move, what you look at, well, yeah, what's your sense of curiosity. So I think that's also what's gonna make people come back to it, see, what if I interact in this way or this way? And it's not just gamifying art. I think it's really about making art that is reactive, like somehow, and it's a new field. And you know what I'm doing with Patrick Sarah by building the tool for artists to create these worlds and this musical world. That's really something I'm paying a lot of attention, how to give the tool to new creators, like young creators, which are not coders, how they're gonna be able to build their own world, to let the other people experience their work in this way. Like, so that's something that for me is super, super important in the way we're building our tool to allow this kind of openness and unique like moments within the art world, artwork, whatever, new type of arts.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, but we have to go to Valentin for, well, I'm not sorry to pass you over to Valentin, because Valentin will be closing this session by summarizing. Over to you, Valentin. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation.
Merci, Fabien.
Thank you, Fabien.
I want to thank Fabien, Melody, Nina, Sarah, and Mehdi for joining us today and having this very open conversation on what it means to work with immersive art and what it means to exhibit it today. So thank you for that. I also want to thank the organizers of the lab and everybody that viewed this live today. Be sure to know that the partners of the lab are gathering all the information of these sessions in one handbook. So everybody that's working with digital media or immersive art, or anyone simply interested in the medium, will be able to find all the information gathered here in one handbook. You can also join us on the online community of We Are Museums to keep the conversation going and a discussion alive. That's where you'll find a lot of useful information. Again, thank you everyone for coming to this live today.